All right, good afternoon or good morning, everyone, rather. It's 10/14, August 1st, 2024. We're here today at LCEA for our next round of bargaining. So we'll get started. We brought some documents today. Obviously with Article 10 and 11. I know that we're kind of putting an agenda together. If you're okay, usually we're pretty flexible on agenda. All right, okay, pass around. Let's see what you guys have listed. Okay, cool. So this is exactly what I was thinking. So we can open. I think everybody at the table is pretty familiar with each other. So we won't go through introductions today, if that's okay with you. Welcome back. And we've got session today, and we have one scheduled for next week also. I'm sure we'll get a lot done over the course of those two meetings. We have brought back some proposals or counter proposals and proposals on Article 10, 11, compensation, supplements, and then there's a couple MOUs with a couple areas that we're still working on and we'll need to bring back for next week. But the big parts, which are 10, 11, compensation, supplements, for the most part, we have response to today. So we'll go ahead and start with Article 10. We'll send that around. We followed just the same kind of format key as what you guys did last week. What was agreed upon in green. We struck through whatever was counter proposed by you guys last, and then bold and underline if there was anything proposed. So we'll step through both of those articles, and then from there we can move into counter proposals for compensation. I will say we had executive session earlier in the week, so all the board members got to hear about all the proposals and counter proposals that you guys have put on the table, along with the superintendent and the CFO joining in on those discussions. So our counter proposals are born out of work at the district office and that executive session.
There's a lot of change.
All right, so Article 10 has come around, and Jeff, if you want to go ahead and just give them 11 also. I'm sorry, I should have told you that, but they're so interrelated in some regards that we'll pass those around. So as you guys know, these are the articles that we focus the majority of the work in. So just going through Article 10, starting off, we had agreed upon some things in Section 5. That remains the same. If you move to Section 8, you'll see we struck language that was proposed. The conferences outside contract hours will follow Article 11, 2A1, which just kind of flows with the rest of our responses. We had agreed to the training on the money collection, so that was good, and our board was happy to hear that, along with the CFO. The notification of teaching assignment supplements that we agreed upon. Under Section 12, teacher planning days, instructional staff shall have the choice to work remotely or at a work site. The work site virtual for these work days, provided there are no scheduled meetings. We struck that language just purely based on, there's a variety of approaches that occur at different schools, and we're aware of that, but we also have to be we have a responsibility to be good stewards of the tax dollar. And I think everybody kind of knows a virtual work day is going to be interpreted in a variety of different ways. So we just assume that we work as a district, and Ms. Feltner has agreed that we try to get as close as to some consistency on how those are coming about. But I would like to have the freedom at those schools to be able to make some of those decisions site-based when necessary and maintain that. Purely based on there's things that teachers are being asked to do that they're busting their humps to do outside of those teacher work days, and that looks different at every school. There's more work to be done at some schools than there are others. Some of them are further along in their collaborative planning and group and PD and working on the PLC processes and all those things that occur than other schools are. So I feel like some schools need that additional attention, and some are just managing the way they do things. And I feel like as long as the teachers at those schools, have the ability to, participate and weigh in on some of those decisions, then we just assume not include that in language as far as the choice of to work remotely. Teacher of the Year program, that's the same as what we agreed upon. So section 19 is a big section, I think, for us. We're still pulling data on that, and there were things. So me striking some of that does not mean that we're totally against figuring that out, right? But we're still weighing that out, looking at substitute data and budget and things that are going on there. We understand what you guys' intent are, and we want to make sure people are taken care of when they're covering classes, especially for extended periods of time. I can tell you the board really liked the idea of figuring out what happens when folks are covering those classes for an extended period of time or beyond just a day or two, and things like, example would be like a maternity leave or some long-term illness type thing or whatever that might be coming about, right? People miss extended periods for long periods of time. And when those teachers step up and are willing to absorb regarding that, when we know that, there's two different scenarios that could happen there, right? That we've gotten to where, we're balancing class sizes the best we can and meeting those demands. But if a teacher resigns and those kids are absorbed and it's going to be posted and there's that's going to extend for a little bit to try and get someone in. So that's what I would see as kind of an extended period of time where people are absorbing classes, or where we know somebody's going to wind up coming in. On the other hand, if it happens to be at a school where there's room within the class size cap, it might be that it's not posted for some reason, but we've really tightened up those allocations. So I don't see that happening as often, right? If it's allocated and the school's due for it, it's going to be posted and we're going to get somebody in. So we need to figure out what we do for those folks for absorbing over that period of time. And then, of course, we know people are going to return from maternity leave. So I feel like, and part of what we battle is I want to be, friendly to and very mindful of folks that are becoming new parents. And if we really want them to come back and not just say, well, I think I'll stay home, then we need to make sure those kids they're coming back to are not a hot mess when they come back, right? And the best way to do that is ensure that they're getting good instruction in the absence of their original teacher. So those are the things we're trying to wrap our mind around and figure out what's affordable and what's proper. So section 19 in no way is a denial that, shooting it down. It's just something that we're going to come back next week with hopefully some more information when we get back to the table in that area. Section 24. So as we're working with SEIU, that it reads paraprofessional in the system, and then on the campus it says teacher assistant. So we definitely agree that teacher aid was confusing for people because that's really out of date language. So we just added a slash teacher assistant so people understand that's what that is in that area. And I've been talking to principals all summer, and there's been some self-contained teachers that have been more than willing to come up and make sure that they're willing to kind of find good help for their classrooms. And it's also given teachers a little taste of what's out there, right? But at least they're having some choices of what's going on in their classroom and the type of individuals that will be coming in there to assist them. So the same thing during the school year. If we can get folks in to participate in that interview process, where we want that to occur. So we still agree with all of that. Just add a few extra words there. Since these two kind of intertwine, if you don't mind, I'll just go through 11 also, and then whatever questions you guys might have following both articles, we can go through. We agreed on the new language around Joint Leadership Committee, Section 1 last time. Under A, you guys have proposed after and before school, before the instructional day, when the bell rings, teachers will not be required to provide supervision unless it is scheduled equitable rotational duty rotation, and equitable duty rotation will be no longer than 10 minutes before or after the student instructional day. So we had a lot of talk about this with the superintendent and the board. And, as we've said before, we were like, okay, well, we need to get back to pre-COVID what we were doing, but I'm not even sure pre-COVID that, that wasn't kind of being taken advantage of anyway, right? So what we're in the process of doing is talking with our principals and looking at the ways it's being handled that are more suitable to what you guys would see fit, right? And if transportation is a big key in that afternoon piece, but we've also got to make sure that schools aren't taking advantage of things. And okay, we're toying with ideas, but I'll have more of that next week also. Okay, is it feasible that your first batch of buses are always sitting there, right? When the bell rings, you get all those kids out. And then as you're waiting for them to come in, maybe there's a small allotment of minutes that are there. And then after that small allotment of minutes is gone, you release the hounds to wherever administration is going to secure them and monitor them until the rest of the buses arrive. That I've seen it firsthand that's being done like that at places, and it's not over infringing on what the teachers think is okay, but it also puts that responsibility back on the administrators to come up with a good plan. So I'm not done with that area either. Just we need to figure a little more out on that, and hopefully we'll come back next week with some information. Also we are making headway. I think we're going to have some decent increases for bus drivers that will hopefully attract some more talent. We've been grinding all summer and before the summer ended, just trying to get more bus drivers in. We got a bunch in the hopper that we're training. So I'm hoping some of those transportation issues will start to take care of themselves. And some of that we'll have more sitting waiting and not having to run doubled and tripled up routes, which are causing that bottleneck in the afternoons, right? And then sometimes in the morning, depending on what level you're at. We agreed on emergency procedures, having the communication trees. We agreed on the start and end time language there. Planning period and intervention. We struck through the proposed language on that. I feel like, with them having the ability to weigh in on planning time, and we're looking at intervention and how we're going to manage those things, but we feel like the principals need the ability to maintain say on what that intervention is going to look like as they work with senior staff at the district also to make that make more sense. It's a lot like some other areas where we've still got a lot of work to do, and we want it to, it's never going to be a carbon copy from one school to the next, right? We know the grade levels are different. We know the class sizes are different. The student enrollment's different, and the allocations are different. So those principals are going to have that ability to and authority to be flexible and create plans for those intervention times. But the hope is that they start to be scheduled a little better and look a little more consistent from school to school, depending upon the grade level. Professional development and pre-planning, I meant to strike the E on top of that also. That's another thing that, you know, as they have those joint meetings, as they have those, I mean, I've got principals and administrators that are planning all throughout the summer, and they're working to design their pre-plannings based on whatever the new demands are coming down the pipe and what new PD's coming about. So I feel like they have to maintain that authority to be able to move through that without, you know, they can present and people can have feedback, but they need to be able to design that in coordination with the district. Section 1, we agreed on the third time and time after language. Then the planning period on this page we agreed with last time. Then we struck the language proposed on the A, B, and C on the next page under planning period. We struck the language on and went back to the original as far as the second planning period. And then underneath that, pretty much went back to what it was before. As far as, I mean, we're not willing to say that parent conferences are not an expected meeting. So we left that the same. And then at the bottom on school schedules, we struck that schools may have times for intervention and acceleration. Intervention and acceleration is not going anywhere. And we are putting some, like I said before, some additional attention on what that design looks like. And we're excited that Mr. Feltner coming into his position is going to make sure that that's looking a little better. And also we're charting that data now that school's got a little bit more back to normal. Charting that data to where we can have some consistent feedback and give you guys responses on here's how we feel like it's working for us. Because your board's also interested in is intervention making a difference. So we feel like it is, but capturing some of that thus far and through some of the trials and tribulations the last couple of school years, I'm not sure that's something we can discern at this moment. The language of no single instructor will have more than 15 students during intervention block. It's just impossible. There's more kids on the campus than what that's just not even feasible or possible. So that was struck. The student early release, we agreed on that was a paid holiday or non-work day that Wednesday after time is individual self-directed planning for teachers. And then the language that we just kind of rearranged a little bit on leaving work hours. So those are those two articles. I'll open up to you guys if you have any questions. And this, what's that?
It's section article 11, section 1E. How you didn't strike that.
Yeah.
So I saw a couple of those that were bold and underlined and not struck through, but it wasn't green, so I wasn't sure.
Which where was that at? Where's the bold underline not struck through?
Article.
Sam?
That one, she's saying in Article 10.
She said 10.
So section 19.
Okay.
Did not cross out the bullets at the bottom for the.
Yeah, that just because that we just need more. I couldn't remember because you guys underlined it and I underlined it and I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, well, I thought it said that before. I was working through this and I was like, you know what? It needs more talk. When we come back next week, we'll have something that outlines more of that. So I should have struck those, but
and you would have then more data as to the splitting the classes and substituting and so forth.
yeah, it's difficult to pull. So that's why, because what is entered, you have your substitute data, which is somewhat reliable, that's entered through Red Rover. And then you have to compare that to, what's budgeted and being spent on substitutes. And then, how does that play out, and where did we actually have some absorption that was long-term? And it's, cause just to be honest, where my mind's at, if somebody's gonna be out for one day, I mean, the teacher has created that absence and their kid, and they absorb them for one day. I mean, I think that's just gonna be a little bit overbearing and monotonous for a one day absorption. That's created by their own colleagues and teachers. You guys know how I feel about teacher attendance, so I'm not gonna go down that road today. But it just needs more work. So we need some more time to look at that, see what's a little better.
And I understand that, but of course, on our standpoint is that it is very difficult for a teacher to receive this release time. Number one, because it says that you're supposed to have the time in most places, within the 5-day period, which we know that usually can happen. And then if somebody does do this, then they can, oh, well, you can go home on a Friday, there's a work day, or Wednesday afternoon, so then that principal is giving it to everybody, not the individual teacher. And so that's why we kept bringing up, of course, all the time, and the fact that, compensation, because it is difficult to track, as you're saying. We've also heard that when a teacher is actually asked for, to, like use a timesheet or do something or give them the information, then no, this is, I've split my class, this, I've had this, and this, then someone on campus, whomever it may be at that point, but someone on campus, comes back and, like almost like defying them as to, like, no, you didn't. And so now, it's like, how can we make sure that these teachers are receiving, if district continues to say, no, they can't receive the compensation, so how are they going to be able to have this release time? Because there are hours at the end of the year that teachers have given up, not necessarily on their own part. I'm not talking about that they stay after school, they do their own thing. That's not what I'm talking about. But there's still hours that they give up sometimes when they are substituting or splitting of students or any of those things at that point.
And that, I think it's kind of a shared responsibility that has to occur there, right? Like if we are going to track it, and it is a little bit of a nightmare to track it, right? Because, a lot of times out of their own kindness, teachers are just absorbing and they don't tell anyone that they absorb, or it's just in passing and it just doesn't get documented. So we got to figure some of that out. That's what we're trying to work on and see what's fair and appropriate. I did like the idea that if we're going to compensate a route, that you guys heard what we said about, okay, well, if everybody gets an hour, then we're way beyond what we budgeted for a substitute. So we heard that. So I'm not saying we're giving up on that. We need some time to look at it. Because the other route is to say no more absorbing students. And I think that hits us all three groups in an area, right? The students are going to get less quality instruction. I don't think our teachers, I think if you ask the majority of our teachers, they would rather have their colleagues take on a few of their kids. Because they're all going to have something. Everybody's going to have something that comes up through the course of the year, and they got a colleague they can depend on, know they're getting good instruction, and they're going to be happy, and that maintains kind of their rhythm and their flow. So, where that pans out as student achievement data and all that good stuff. And then also it helps out tremendously with the administration that's trying to run things orderly and keep things in gear. So we'll continue to look at it, and I would hate to come back and just say no more class splitting, because I think we would probably have a lot of unhappy teachers with that also. But it's the easiest way to stop the issue, right? But and the other piece of that is we have, like I mentioned last time, renewed the MOU with SEIU to provide them for covering. They get a little extra money on the MOU to provide for sub coverage also. So I got that crew. I gotta make sure that it doesn't get abused and that they're willing. But anytime we can make teachers' lives a little easier and provide a little additional compensation to the folks that don't earn, salary, then that's always a good thing. So hopefully that maintaining that MOU will keep some of that pressure off. But it's hard, right? When they might come in and cover for a couple hours, where as a teacher absorbing has got those kids all day. So I'm aware of that too. And it's hard for, say, a bookkeeper, a school secretary, or someone like that to sit in a classroom all day long, especially if it's going to move beyond multiple days. So my idea is for the short term, hopefully we can handle that, and getting the proper amount of subs and getting things in. I would hope the schools, we need them to err on the side of getting a sub, especially when it's short term. But at the same time, that means teachers have to be understanding that it's going to be okay if a sub's in there for a day and they don't necessarily have to absorb in order to maintain, and they're not going to lose a whole lot of ground. So.
Well, it's just, sometimes when, especially like, and of course, again, mainly elementary, where you split the classes, and of course, then they have them all day. And then, if Johnny and, whoever Thomas wasn't supposed to be together, but now all of a sudden they're together because, that creates then those other issues where we have some situations that tend to come up also. So, we have to watch where, some of that discipline won't.
You're right.
With,
yeah, they strategically schedule kids, right? So you're right. That's something we haven't really brought out on the table when we talked about this, that there's a reason those youngins aren't together. So I get it that does cause, not all splits are equal. There's some brave soul that's picking up some of the more challenging kids when those classes are split up. So then that's something we probably need to encourage our administration to look at too. And I'm sure a lot of times they do, right? Oh no, that's not going to work. He doesn't, this Johnny, for lack of a better name, poor Johnny. But they I'm sure they do have some alternate arrangements they make from time to time, right? So or they attach somebody to, if there's some ESE support, they usually go into that classroom. They need to follow where the biggest needs are too. So we'll keep working on it. Like I said, I'm not shooting section 19 down. We just got to figure it out. That's been hard. Sure.
There's section 24. Yes. Paraprofessional and training.
Yeah.
Black, but not showing through, so are
you guys had not agreed to teacher assistants yet, so that was new. I put that on there as new and underlined, so that will go to green if you guys agree with that, which I assume y'all won't have a problem with that problem.
And just as again a formatting thing, if you go to section 13, we need to take out the DAC. Observation of classroom, very bottom of the page. Take off the DAC below the theory.
Gotcha. Yeah, anything we can point out now will help with. Well, yeah, well, it's in 18 I think. So there's a couple places as we're combing it when we're done. For formatting, we'll definitely, but that helps. To notice them now helps. So.
I also have
okay.
That article. I think we had talked about in the last session that we were gonna look at whether or not this needs to be updated at all in workplace training. So
yeah.
You have that conversation.
The workplace safety committees are still a thing. So they're working to see how that's going to be reorganized and making sure that they're handling that properly. So I don't have the complete feedback on that yet, but I can make sure we bring that next session of an update.
Because just talking about that situation, I know some need more than others.
Mm-hmm.
That's one reason why we said something and brought in, I think the language that we're talking about, that it was in, quarterly or twice a year or something or other, just because, but I know that some of them don't need it all, and then they're kind of not knowing what's going on. Yeah. I think that's why we were kind of talking about that too.
Yeah, we're, this is more of a was determined that it's more of a risk management thing. Than necessarily what we think of what's traditionally, school safety now. So it's more of a Mr. Orio's department than a Mr. Mabry's department. So, we'll work through that and see exactly what, it's kind of like our, the healthy schools committee or whatever that we have in the district, getting people to come to those sometimes is like pulling teeth. So we need to set up some structures for accountability when some of these necessary committees aren't occurring as frequently as they need to, or at all.
Happy to be any other one revenue issues?
Haven't so far, nothing's kind of stood out to me besides that one. And I guess I would say, just to put it out on record, and I guess it might be in section 20. I'm assuming what we talk about, like a placement review and
Yeah.
those types of things. I know at one time we talked about that a little
Yeah.
bit too, with state statutes and so forth,
Yeah.
but, we are receiving, and I don't know whether you guys, our district is or not, but I mean, we're seeing more and more of the student discipline. To the fact that, it's just regular student discipline, but, all the way up to very, very aggressive situations where it seems like sometimes it's taking a long time
Yep.
to solve some issues, let's call it. And, we might need to kind of look at some of that along the way.
So I was going to slate that. I know we mentioned that from the first meeting. I've got a slate to bring back next week too. I will tell you some progress in those areas. We did some realignment in the district departments, and we moved student discipline back under safety and security. And with the intent that it's going to be a very serious approach to student discipline this year. I mean, granted, we got to make sure that the rights of our students are taken care of when it comes to folks that have 504s and IEPs, but that we also are mindful of the rights of all of our students in the student body and our teachers and employees and paraprofessionals and administrators. So Mr. Mabry will be taking charge on that. I can tell you he gave a very strong message at our principal business meetings last week that we're not playing and that we're going to take it serious and we're going to cut down on some of that time that it's taken to get things done. I mean, I think everybody in this room that works at the school knows you're going to run into some ESC things, right? And that's when it gets really tough. But I know teachers understand that. They've been dealing with it for a long time, just like everybody else has, and the administrators are just as frustrated sometimes. But we've set up, some other things, whether it be our more therapeutic settings for our students or alternative programs, that we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page and talking to one another, and that because that's what we found was taking a long time. Our principals would call and try and get help, and it was too fragmented. And whether they were ESC or 504, they did this or this or this, or was a regular ed, or is this an alternative saying to they therapeutic? So they've really streamlined that and channeled it, and moving folks like Carlos Celis and some program specialists into that safety and security area so we can really hone in. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know we talked about it before and I didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, the reason I didn't add anything in regards is because that was more of a risk management piece. And it's really just making sure that they're having those meetings and people are responsive to risk management when they're trying to set them up. It was probably just born out of, we get it. Everybody's got a million meetings, but and this is probably more slip, falls, environmental type issues, things like that they need to be mindful of. But it will save the district a tremendous amount of money. The less slips, trips, falls, and workman's comp claims we have, which in turn allows me to come in here with more money. So it's something we got to focus on.
Fred will have some more.
Yeah. I figure after caucus you would, right? Okay. All right, so we'll move into compensation. We have a counter proposal on compensation. We can go ahead and pass that sheet around. On the one that focuses on pay for performance. Not yet, we're gonna go.
When you look this up, right? That's where we're going. That's good. Well, that's happening. Over like the big house, 11 and up there. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Really.
So the so you guys made a lot of guys made some pretty increased proposals from last time. So the first steps that we took were costing these out, and they came with a pretty hefty price tag that moved us well beyond the budget. However, we did feel like we need to sharpen the pencil a little bit and see what we could find to move on some of the items you guys brought forward. So originally what we had put on the table was the 5.7 million with performance pay, and with all of the proposals put together that you guys brought forward, it came up to a total of 9.8 million. So it's about $4 million separation there, which is a tremendous amount. Now, some of that comes into that retention supplement you guys asked for, and we want to get some further clarification on that, because that was a big price tag once we laid that across the appropriate data and what we understood to be what you guys were asking for. So after we talk about performance pay, Guido's gonna get some clarification from you guys. So so basically with the performance pay, you see the counter proposal that takes our $5.78 million proposal that we initially came forward and brings it to $6,021,000 and some change. So so we contributed some more dollars in that direction, and we felt like the numbers were came out and looked pretty decent. So for highly effective, initially offered 2,400, and you guys countered 3,000. Now we came up to 2,500. And then for effective 1,875 from the original 1,800 we had put on the table. And then we were able to bring up the grandfather highly effective to $2,000, and the grandfather effective was 1,875. So the next piece, we don't have a counter proposal for on the retention LCEA retention supplement. The price tag, once we went through that, came up to over $2.2 million. So that we don't have budget for $2.2 million retention supplement. I fully understand the idea behind it. And, but it's just moved well beyond what we can afford at this time. Guido, do you want to ask some clarification on that, just to
Yeah.
make sure? Because what happened last time, you guys proposed the language you proposed, and then I think there was some questions about clarification that Guido posed, and then once he understood what you guys expressed verbally to us, that's when he said, okay, I've got that, and then he went back and started doing the computing, so he'll speak to that now.
So I just want to clarify what I pulled. In order for somebody to qualify for the retention bonus, they have to been working consecutively in our district for 5 years. And if they're working consecutively for 5 years and only those 5, then it will be $500 because it'll be 100 per year. If it's somebody that's working 5 years in a row, but they brought in 2 years from another county, they have a total of 7, so it would be $700. So then I calculated correctly. The only issue that I have was, and not an issue, it's a concern and a question, was the calculation. When I started looking at all the years of experience that the teachers have, working in public sector, working in a non-public experience, working in a state public experience or out of state non-public. And we missed 2 columns of data that a lot of teachers bring, which is what do we do with military service? That in some cases, are you disqualifying that? And then administrator experience, because we have teachers that have gone both sides. They've worked 5 years out in an administrative role in another county, but they transfer into our district with the teacher, they get years of service. So you did not mention any of that. So without those 2 roles, I'm already at $2.2 million. Not the original, but what you thought, because you didn't have the whole data. You had the 200,000, something in that area. It wasn't that, it was a lot. It's a lot more than that. So.
Can I ask a question? now?
Yes,
So, why did you not include the military service or the? Right, I understand that, but so do y'all normally include that in your years of?
when we do years of service for experience, yes.
Okay, so
If
what
I-
about this language would exclude that? As is.
I excluded it and it was 2.2. If I include it, it will be higher. If you want me to include it, I'll go ahead and include military and administrator, and I can give you that count within a couple of minutes.
I was just curious why you thought that our initial proposal wouldn't have included that. Like, did we say anything here that would have given that?
I was going exactly by the language, instructional teaching. So I did not ask for administrator experience, I did not ask for military experience. And because the number was so high, I did not call to clarify because I was already way off in cost. And I can actually, if we go to caucus, I can calculate and give you that exact amount with those 2 columns added.
So, next, we have a counter on the speech language pathology. So we'll put the numbers out there first, and then Guido has a lot more discussion, he'd like to have around that topic as we've really dug into the data and what the district is spending and how they're staffing and what that's costing us.
Yes, I'm gonna pass my predictions.
So he just wants to talk about the rationale and kind of how we're balancing out that, right? Because as we've talked about this a few times, you got some districts that are 100% contract, and you got some that are 100% 100% direct hire. So he's passing around some information, but basically you guys have put an additional $10,000 on top of the supplements that are already being provided, which is a supplement for the Cs and a critical shortage. And he can talk about that a little more as we go through it. So what we're proposing is pushing the C supplement from $3,000 to $5,000.
Once everybody gets the sheets, I'll go ahead and start talking about it. So. Okay. Everybody has the sheets. Okay. And when we met and we discussed speech and language proposal, this presentation was brought forward to us. So, and in doing so, I went ahead and I started doing a cost analysis of all SLP transactions and cost of employment and vendors. So I went to the board docs, pulled contracts that were approved. I went to finance department and pulled POs that we paid from July 1st last year through June 30th. This that just passed for 23-24. The sheet that you see, all the vendors are the actual POs that I found that had SLP. Now, I want you to realize some of these vendors actually do provide POs for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and other services. Those were taken off from the cost. So when I started looking at it, I started looking at what they were charging last year, which is the first line that you see for the rate, and the actual hours that they billed for the year. So I added all those POs, all those hours billed, and those are the contract costs that were paid out for last school year. So when I look at each company, each vendor, and I go straight across, what we paid as a district last year for SLP was $1,577,000 and change. Okay, and that's me looking at every PO that came in. Now, below it is the number of SLPs paid to that contract. I found in the midst of doing so that we found that we paid 30 different individuals for providing SLP services. Now, looking at the next row, that's the new cost with the percent increase that's happening this school year. Okay, the last row in that particular sheet where all the vendors are is just me giving you an estimated cost. If they were to bill us the same amount and at the new rate, that would be the cost, $1,638,000. That would be an estimated cost. Okay, so I just wanted to show that so that you can understand what we actually paid as a district for SLP services. Before I move on to the next sheet, does anybody have a question?
You know what the number of hours they're paying for each SLP, because I was under the impression that they're being paid 7 hours a day. They are getting pre-planning, they are getting future work days.
So an SLP send the PO and they put their hours in and they put the billed hours is the billed hours that they worked. That's what I was able to read from multiple companies and POs that I read. Some companies are more specific as they send their POs and payments. They're very detailed, some are not, but all have something in common. The final PO says hours billed, total amount that we have to pay. So I basically took every PO that I got, checked the name, checked to see how many hours they worked, added it up together, and see how much we paid. Now, there's more to it. I'm going to discuss more. That's just me giving you basically a very, if I miss something on a PO, because these are thousands of pages on contracts that I have to go through every PO and look to see. And the whole goal is I wanted to see why they charging. I had a CRA charging $615,000 total cost that we paid to them. I wanted to see, I went through the biggest vendor and I wanted to see how they process their pay. And now I only gave you counts. I also have a list of how many schools each one of those serve, which plays into the mix of hours. And when I say that, it's because if you look at the vendors towards the end and new Mediscan, they have 340 hours with one person. The other one has 1291 with 2 people. So you know already that what's the name? Hold on.
Amen.
AMN Allied Service provided basically two people to provide part-time work, part-time hours. Okay, so I'm just like that plays a role because they serve different amount of schools depending on where they are going or the area they're servicing in our district. But I wanted to at least provide you a cost versus the sheet when you provided the SLP cost. I wanted you to see the actual, what it is. Now, moving to the next page, I want to explain what employment cost is. Because what a teacher, an instructional staff makes versus what the actual cost to the district is. This sheet, I'm looking at this sheet, the one that has highest and lowest. That is the actual highest paid SLP we have and a common lowest brand new SLP that comes in. We have an SLP contractually making that amount of money, but when you look at the district cost, after adding the supplements of CCC critical shortage, I add what the cost is for health insurance, the Florida retirement system, workman's comp, and employer taxes. That is the district cost of an employee at that rate, $102,000. So the hourly rate that actually, if you were going to compare hourly rates of a vendor to hourly rates of a district cost, that's what you're comparing a red apple to a yellow apple. Okay, so that is the cost of the highest paid SLP. That is the cost of an SLP without the 3 C's supplement, only the critical shortage supplement, and then the district cost. Questions about that? Because I'm gonna go to the next sheet.
So I'll just say that I have 14, I'm going on my 14th year. I just, when you look at what you're taking home, and I'm taking home, I believe it's about $35 an hour. And the contract person who could literally work in the desk next to me is taking home $60 an hour. And has a 401k, and has medical, and has vision, and you know what I'm saying?
I'm not gonna discredit any of that.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to present today is cost. Because
Yeah.
if I want to analyze cost, I need to show the true picture of cost. And when you say 401k, yes, when I was working in private sector, you have 401k, but I have to contribute out of my check to that 401k, and the employer then matches something.
And it's usually a lower percentage.
It's usually a lower percent. Typically, it's a lower percentage depending on how much you want to invest and what vendor you choose for your 401k. With the Florida retirement system, it doesn't work that way. We're already contributing and we're paying that cost.
It's just when you're making $25, or $25
And-
more an hour, it's a little easier to put into your 401k.
And I do completely agree with you when you say that way, but I wanted you to see the cost.
Yeah.
So then I go to the next sheet. I took the column of the vendor total cost and I started analyzing what it would be for me to do a 1-to-1 match, 30-to-30, and then looking at the hours, what it would cost me. Obviously, if I hired a brand new SLP, just like you said, I will be paying that SLP $49,250 at the top in blue at $33.50. And if I hire 30 of those, my cost is $46.90, and then it will be $2,068,000. That's the cost for the district to have 30 employees at that rate. If I hire them at $35.54, $52,250 because they get the $3,000 supplement, then my cost becomes $2,177. Those two first columns after the yellow column, if you look at the bottom, that would be the cost at the new rates of 24.25. So I'm already incurring district costs because of the new health benefits cost, the new taxes increases on employers and all that. So just to show you what it will cost 30-30. But I agree with you, that will be an unfair comparison. I'm gonna say it out loud because I'm gonna be honest with you. When you look at the hours that an SLP works for a vendor, the first two companies that I showed you, that one works 300 hours, another one works 2 people, 1,200 hours. I have to start analyzing. I'm gonna go back to the list and see how many schools are these people serving so that I can understand more or less how many actual employees I need. So I took a dab at it. I started looking at hours worked, how many sites they have. I said, those 30, I probably can stretch it to 18. So if I hire 18 staff members, SLPs, with the $3,000 supplement and all that, my cost would be around $1.3 million. And yes, at that rate, and if I only hire 18, correct, I'm gonna be overspending at vendor, which is 1.577. But that's me estimating that I'll be able to serve with 26,460 hours, the 23,000 hours that the vendors are charging. Now, I did find out that those 30 last year served 26 sites. The vendors, I'm going with 18, and I'm starting to ask my question, and I'm not the SLP expert. Can I serve 26 sites with 18 SLPs? And my answer is, I think my answer is no. So then I started looking, my most recent hires in the district, the most recent 25, if I added by 10, I am spending $1.7 million last year district cost. I'm already over what I'm spending on vendors. And that's an average. I took the most recent hires. They go back all the way to 2019 till now. Those salaries, some are at the beginning, some are in the middle, some are at the top. That cost is 1.7. Next year, those same individuals or those same SLPs are going to cost me $1.8 million because of healthcare costs, taxes, and workman's comps and FRS. Now, I go back and look at this year. So let me go get the list of vendors that we approved for this year and see who we have scheduled. Right now, the last column tells me that I have 23 scheduled to come in on our district. The weighted cost at the bottom, 1.537, I did a weighted cost of what it would be if they were to charge me at the new rate, same amount of hours at those rates. I gave CRA the higher rate, the higher weight, because we hired the most out of CRA, which I believe we have scheduled 11 out of the 23 from them. So I did that. I'm projecting that we're already going to be spending the same amount, and I'm at 23, not 30. I know for sure we're probably going to spend more than that. But then I look at also the cost of employment. So I just needed to bring to the table what is actually costing the district versus just the employment salary. It is very hard to compare apples to apples when not the whole picture is there with actual numbers. Now, I will add to this, what I do not know, which is, it's part of the story, is I also have to consider not only number of sites, caseloads. What am I doing with caseloads? I have to consider number of hours billed versus employee hours. I contract a person out at 1,470 hours. Well, they're not charging me 1,000. They're not giving me 1,470 hours. They're charging me for every hour they're touching a student. So my question becomes, I also have to consider at that point, consult cases versus therapy cases. Are they charging me for consult cases at the same rate? And these are questions that I have because I needed to make sure that I understood how they are billing us in our district. Then I look at benefits, what you said, you have a 401k. You know, I start looking, okay, how is their benefit package compared to our benefit package? How is schedules? What are their schedules look like when you have a person coming to our district working 300 hours? Are they working 303 districts around the area? 300 plus 300 plus 300, and they're making their whole day that way, the whole week. And part-time versus full-time. Right now, as it is, you were correct. With the presentation said that we were at like a vendor 33. We were 1/3 vendors, 2/3 employment. That is correct. But when it comes to cost, we're almost even. Yet I have about 37 or 39 because I have a couple of SLPs that resigned or retired. I can't remember what their reason was, but we are at 66% employment with 37 at the end of the year that I had active rolling over for this year versus the 30 that served hours in our district. So, and then to throw into the mix, the last thing that I found out when I was looking at this was apparently we also serve private sites, and it plays a role into the cost of the district. So now you have a clear picture of the cost when it comes to a vendor to an actual employment cost. Something that I will say on a positive note, we've been meeting with Mr. Stein at the ESC department. He has informed, at least he had conversations with me, that he has met with a group of SLPs. And some of the things that he has said to me is that he's gonna start reviewing the allocation formula for SLPs to see how they can manage what's going on with caseloads, because of what has been brought to his attention is caseloads of secondary versus caseloads of elementary. And the schedule of meetings has been an issue. And apparently a lot of meetings have been scheduled during their planning time, during the employment. Exactly, and you haven't had the time that you need to prep for dealing with SLP planning. And so that's gonna be looked at. And duties was also brought forward, so that's something we are addressing as a district. So know that these are areas that we need to improve on, and we are putting focus on that. ESC, Mr. Stein is gonna be addressing those. But that is what I wanted to convey today. That's what we're working. And when we looked at our compensation as a whole, we came with this counter proposal of increasing the CCC to 5 instead of 3. Questions?
Consider the income that we bring with the
No, I did not discuss credits on that because I was looking at all the cost that was coming. I did not look at income from Medicare, which is.
But we did, the CFO, Mr. Ward, that did come up in executive session, and what's coming in from the billing, it's a small dent in the big picture. I don't have specific. Yeah. And we know SLPs have been from the very beginning some of the best folks we have about doing the documentation for that billing, and we're thankful for that. But we wish it did provide a lot more, but it's not super significant.
I think the other part of that is your direct hires invest a lot more into the building than your contracting. Yeah, SLP. So I've done this for a lot of years, and when your heart is in your school building, you do a lot more for your principal, and you do a lot more without even getting paid for it. So like out on the car when I took down, and I could say no, but you have people who are direct hires who are not going to do that because they love where they're at and they love their school. So yes, the contract money, look, what you're saying is that there are a lot of us who are direct hires who are not taking the benefits, who are not. So you gotta look at the person, not just the figures. That's what I'm.
You're completely right. I understand. Teachers as a whole, they all work more than what actually the contract is. To include my wife, she was last night putting letters for her site. So I understand.
I don't have that proposal, the counter proposal in front of me, just that passed around. I just want to say that the contractors work less hours than us. They don't have duty, they don't have to be observed, they don't have to do DPPs. They do less and they get paid more, and it's not a lot of incentive to stay direct hire. I'm just disappointed in it now. I don't think it's going to encourage people to come direct hire when they can just go contract and have the same job and work less.
Honestly, as we have new people coming in, I appreciate the folks who are a lot like me, who we're committed through FRS at this point in our lives, right? But I think we're going to struggle to bring new graduates in out of these programs anyway, quite frankly. I mean, just based on the compression alone of where a starting instructional salary is, I don't really see how we're going to compete anyway, because I mean, we all know where this list of companies, it looks like they possibly collectively made a decision to gouge us out, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're up against that challenge, and it's not an appreciation, not having an appreciation for what you guys are doing or any instructional employees are doing, but we've only got so much fixed, money allocated to us from the legislature, and we have to work within that to make sure we're increasing everybody every time we can and spread the wealth a little bit. So it's a challenge. I hear you. I get what you're saying. it's a challenge.
And I cost out on the last proposal, it said that if we wish, we could bring them up to $43 the hour. So I cost it out. If I hire 21 at $43 with the 750 critical shortage and the 3,000, it would cost the districts $1.9 million. And it's not because I don't want to hire them at that, it's just that's the cost. I'm just telling numbers wise. So it's very hard. It puts districts in a position that, and that's not the cost at every district. That's not, every district has a different cost because their health is different and how they budget, it's different. That's our cost.
You know, when we refer to the income or the billing that's
Mhm.
done, that number doesn't appear here. In order for us to really get a true idea of actual cost, can we ask for that number to be added in here so that we can see how much money is brought in?
I would say this, I don't know if that billing is specific enough that when we do a credit, I don't know if they itemize it to what's SLP, what's PT, what's OT, like there's other services along, so it was it's not something that I can guarantee that I cannot just say, because I can get medical billing credit and it might be a whole credit, but it won't be line.
Is that itemized?
It might not be itemized.
So we'll look into it.
We'll look
Yeah.
into it. We'll look into it, but I don't know. I don't want to say yes and not be able to provide you something that I cannot provide.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next. So, the section you guys brought forth, social worker supplement, we do not have a counter proposal to that at this time. We felt like as we were addressing the different areas, the social worker area is a new one. And we, right now, with the extra funds we were allotted to us to be able to work with, that it's not included in a counter proposal. But just for you guys' knowledge, it had the 3,500 for the one group with LCSW or the LMSW, and then grandfather with bachelor's and master's. The total of that came to $108,500.
Max of 108. We're still confirming some of the certifications.
Okay. So JROTC, we have a counter for that we can pass around. Or actually, rather than a counter, we have an agreement. You guys had asked for the $3,000 supplement for JROTC. So just so you guys know, the counter does provide for a $3,000 supplement. And agreeing to what you guys asked for, but he in his presentation, it wasn't really included in the proposal, but was for them to be included in performance pay, and their performance pay and their salary, we're not allowed to set that. They have what is called a minimum instructor pay, that is set by their branch, and that's not something that we're gonna go into, and they won't be making performance pay. I can tell you that the ROTC salaries pretty high for what's out there. But due to the fact that, you know, they have changed the law and that they can reimburse for, you know, we pay for half a month, they pay for half a month, and they spread that to where you can go up to more months now. So we were paying for that all ourselves for that last month on their contract. Now we can split that half month. So that enabled us to take some of that money and put it back towards a supplement. So whenever I looked at what most districts were doing around us, contiguous, it was matching to say like around the student government advisor supplement. And but when you look at that number, it was closer to like $2,700, which is higher than what our student government stuff is. So when we looked at it, we felt like the board especially was pretty adamant that if we were gaining some funds back from that supplement, we wanted to direct or gaining some funds back from that split on the salary for that last month, that they did want to direct that money towards a supplement for them. So the other piece that's come into this, and y'all might want to research also, is we've got there's differing minds in our ROTC instructors. I feel like we had someone who you guys brought to the table and was part of the bargaining last time. And then we have other instructors that feel like that's not within the law, that they're supposed to be bargaining through you guys as part of the instructional unit and how that's organized, right? But regardless of what we have found, even what the minimum instructor pay, we get that we can't hit that salary at that angle. We are authorized to go above and beyond as a district directly with them and their branch to provide an additional supplement. I've seen where the supplements are included in some contracts, and I'm like, all right, is that just for the benefit of an information and it's included in that or not? I don't know. To me, it makes sense for it to be housed there with the rest of the supplements anyway, but I feel like we probably need to do a little more research on that, especially if you guys have folks that are signing up, whether, because I know those numbers are really important to y'all right now, and it wouldn't want to appear that something wasn't in order. So we'll look into it on our end, and you guys probably need to look into it on your end and get some clarification on that. But regardless, it was presented in here, a proposal was made, so we're countering back at that proposal with an agreement of the $3,000 supplement.
It's also some confusion, because I was looking at other ones like with JRTC, because like when you have the proposal, it says all instructor employees get the performance pay, but then if JRTC's in our unit, then they would qualify, because the contract says all instructional employees. And I think Marion County has an entire separate section on JRTC separately. So I wonder if, I mean, based on these years, but that since their pay is different, do we need to make extra open book? Do we need to add a section since their pay is different? Because you have language that says they should apply them because they're instructional, but then at the same time you're saying that they don't. So
yeah,
so I think Marion County has a specific straight up separate section just about JRT's pay, I guess, to eliminate that confusion of you have something that says all instructional employees, but
Yeah.
wait, but not them, but.
I agree.
They are, like, that's why I was like all instructional employees, they're instructional.
And
Separating them out in our current contract language, so.
so I think we do need to look at that, and open book probably be time to do some research and do some things. I think right now we err on the side of past practice is where they're not included in that, but we get some clarification and see if we do need to separate that out and figure it out. There's some very strong personalities and some differing opinions within our JRTC instructors, so it gets a little interesting, I think. So there was we had information sent to us by one of them that was absolutely opposed to the fact that this stuff was being negotiated in here. So, the Army, Navy, Air Force, that's a whole different world, right? So I don't want to get our employees in trouble. Whether they're part of a unit, not part of a unit, they're all part of our team, right? So I just want to make sure that we're not getting anybody in hot water and that everything's accurate. So we can check more on that. But as far as I'm concerned, just so you guys know, we're prepared to provide that to them. No social worker counter. I mean, quite frankly, we're focusing on our critical shortage areas, and there's only so much budget to attack all in this year. And as we look more into the plight of the social worker, I mean, at some point, everybody's got to have a certification or a license to work in our district under an instructional capacity in one way or another. So it's like, at what point, I mean, if something's a condition of employment, I mean, that's like, are we going to pay somebody extra because they have a teacher certification because they have to have it? It's like, I feel like at some point, we're nickel and diamond, and it's gonna take away to the overall compensation that we're providing to our instructional employees. I'm not saying they're not worthy of it, and when I look at the data, it looks like some districts provide it, some districts don't. But at this point, I feel like we need to focus on those really difficult to hire areas based on the budget that we can bring to the table. And it's not something that we won't revisit. I mean, I'm sure that was probably the group that fled out. It's just a matter of we can't prioritize everything in 1 year. So, and that the total price tag, I mean, we're $4 million apart on what y'all brought back last time. I mean, I get it. You gotta shoot for the stars, right? But we still have a fixed budget we're working within. It's not that we don't appreciate what they're doing, but at the end of the day, they're doing their job. You know, the JRTC, they're stretched out. They're doing a lot outside of their contract hours because we get a benefit from it, but that's not necessarily a condition for employment for us. That's a condition for the employment from the military branch, right? But I think we can express appreciation and the dent they're making in helping these kids move toward a productive life. And I'm not dumb. I know it's a huge recruitment tool for them also. So they're getting some goodie out of it as far as the branch. So, it's no disrespect to the social workers. It's just, it's probably new to y'all also, right? I don't think in the 8 years I've been here, we've ever even talked about a social worker. So I just weighing it out against what we're trying to do to make sure we're providing adequate services for all of our students and focusing on critical shortage areas. That's where we arrived for this. Yeah, it was $100,000.
Yeah.
$108,500.
And I think what they were looking at, and I can't speak to them because I'm a social worker, but in the conversation that I had with them, it was comparing the additional license, clinical and master's sort of work that's on top of the regular instructional staff.
Like some of the other ones, like that, some of these different ones that need the psychologists, the different ones that need that extra. That's why they.
So on the critical shortage piece, did y'all bring that with you today?
We don't. We're gonna bring critical shortage back for discussion next week.
So is there, I guess, but I was curious if there would be conversation about adding social work to the critical shortage area or some other way.
If it's
That position critical. Yes.
if it shows that it's truly a critical shortage spot. We haven't had to do a tremendous amount of recruiting and beating the bushes to get social workers. So I'm not saying it's not a difficult job, but we haven't had a real hard time of getting it.
I believe I checked this morning, there were only 3 allocations open, but typically that position gets filled. It's not an allocation that we've had issues filling.
And that's not to disrespect them or say that there's not value to the work. But when we're working with a fixed amount of money and focusing on priorities, everybody can't be the priority for the year. Same thing we face in our bargaining unit with SEIU, right? From 1 year, we got to focus on one group. Next year, we'll focus on the next group. And so sometimes it's just, unfortunately, some groups have to exercise a little more patience coming to the game. So
I'm sure we'll conversate.
okay. So I think outside of that, we have some MOUs that we've had some discussion about. Nothing too earth shattering on these. And usually with MOUs, we don't do 30 copies of them. So we'll provide one to Elizabeth and Kathy.
Just the 2 copies of that one, we have 2 copies there.
I'll take them.
Take those 2 copies.
So Lincoln Park, and I'll read it on the record so people, since there's not a copy for everybody. Lincoln Park Education Center, Lake County Schools and Lake County Education Association acknowledge the significance of addressing and fulfilling the needs of all students. As a result, Lake County Schools has established a Lincoln Park Education Center to operate as a dynamic and adaptable high school. LPEC offers a unique educational setting and a wide range of academic programs in partnership with Lake Sumter College and Lake Technical College. Both parties agreed to the terms listed below. So work days, Monday through Thursday, the Lincoln Park Education Center operates on a double shift model, Monday through Thursday, with morning and afternoon sessions to accommodate students' diverse schedules and needs. Fridays are designed as an optional student attendance day, offering them a flexible opportunity to engage in personalized support sessions, meet with teachers for extra assistance, and utilize resources tailored to their educational needs and attend parent-teacher conferences. And as you go to the second page of it, teachers will have office hours on Fridays between 7 and 11 a.m., structured and scheduled by each teacher. The remainder of the day will consist of planning, parent conferences, and faculty meetings. And then it has the schedule. So currently what enrollment supports and where we're at a minimum for the first semester, we'll be running a typical morning shift. So that's 7 to 7:15, some planning, 7:15 to 8:15, and so on and so forth for 5 periods. And then a duty-free lunch from 12:27 to 12:57, then the 45-minute planning period from 1 to 1:45, and then a lab, which is 1:45 to 2:30. On Fridays, the hours are 7 a.m. to 1:30, and it still equates to that 37.5 hours, and then adding in the duty-free lunch to go with that. So the compensation is the typical what's aligned by the by the bargaining unit or collective bargaining agreement. And we put on here like typically, but it's definitely in accordance for this one is both parties agree to reopen discussion regarding the terms of this agreement at any time upon the request of either party. So as we enroll students and plan towards a second evening shift, we feel like we don't have the details of what that's going to look like yet, but we would not engage in that second shift until we came and sat back down with you guys and discussed full details on it. Like I mentioned before, we have about 6 classroom allocations dedicated to it with a few non-load bearing. And it's really it's really a work in progress, but we're going to be working with you guys on it anytime we make a change that's going to impact their work day or anything that has to do with them in those settings. So I do still, want you guys to have a better understanding. So right now we're kind of all hands on deck. I'm out there meeting with construction and facilities and everything that's oriented to it. And Mr. Feltner was out there working with everything instructional and IT and curriculum and everything to make sure things are getting in order. So we're actively, engaging with the Mr. Williams, the administrator there, and Portia Byfield, Dr. Byfield, who's over him to make sure that we get off to a start. Quite frankly, there's some delay in the construction. That's beyond what we're capable of doing. We've had people working 7 days a week, sometimes till midnight, and we're grinding to get it done. But at some point I had to make a decision that, what was best to make sure things will be done the way we want them. So they'll be moving into a wing, just FYI for y'all. I know it doesn't have anything to do with agreement, but then we've withheld a wing and kept it up to date with 6 classrooms they'll move into at the beginning. And we're looking at the day after Labor Day to moving into the nice new facility. So we didn't want to, we felt the quality of work and the timeline would be a lot better if we wait until day after Labor Day. So, but it's going to be a great thing once it all comes to fruition, but it's a lot of moving parts. And it's like some of these other campuses that when you start sticking a shovel in the ground on these old campuses, no telling what you're going to find. And we've found a lot of interesting things as we went along. No bodies, but electrical lines and old pipes and and different challenges that come along, right? So you don't face some of those challenges worried about skinks and blue jays or scrub jays and all that because it's a site that's already been determined, but you find plenty of other stuff. So it's gonna be a little different, a little unconventional. And a little unconventional once it's done, but it's gonna be a great program for kids. So that's kind of the Lincoln Park. You guys can chew on that and then look at it. If you have adjustments, we can sign off next week, or I'm sorry. Well, actually they come to work, back to work Monday. So if you guys are okay with signing it, there's nothing, we're not gonna be flexible on, and we're not, everybody's pretty much in line. The people that,
It's right now, first, I mean, just looking at it, my first instinct was telling me, but I have to put it out there on record. Because when you look at the actual time, so I'm assuming they are 7.5 hour days, except Friday. So I'm assuming that Friday, you're just thinking that one less hour is basically for them to do their lunch and plan, you know, whatever they do, then just like on their own, in other words.
Actually, it should be 2:30 there.
go ahead and speak to.
It should be 2:30. That's a mistake. Every
Okay,
day.
so the Friday should be the 2:30.
2:30, so they
Okay.
have, yeah, they have, that should be, we apologize on that.
Okay, so basically they would run the Friday, they just don't have the,
Yeah,
well,
the
they would have
shift,
students for part of the day.
the schedule,
If
when,
it's attended, if they have to come. to make up.
when we get to the point that enrollment, we're gonna have the open afternoon shift, that's when the Friday will shift to an earlier day leaving, because we're gonna have an afternoon shift coming in on top of the morning shift. So the schedules will have to change at that time. They
So
are
this part here would definitely probably
change time.
once.
Once we get enrollment for the,
Okay.
once we get enrollment for the second shift, yes.
So we can, I think we can make that adjustment through caucus, and we'll just ask you guys to print it out.
We're running a regular schedule for the morning right now with Lincoln Park, because we don't have, the enrollment's not there for the afternoon.
That was just the first thing I noticed.
No, I'm glad you pointed out. No.
So next one coming around, did y'all have to pass out night school?
Yes.
MOU? Okay, night school MOU, nothing really changed except for the school year, but where it came into play was the work hours. After looking at, we've got a grant that's funding this, right? And it's always dependent on the life of the grant, but we know we're good to go for the 24-25 year. And the big piece of that was, if we're gonna stay at that increased compensation rate that teachers are giving later in the evenings with these programs, then we had to reduce some of the hours to stay within the budget of the grant. So instead of the 5.5 hours, it's 3.5 hours there on the teacher's work time, but they still have the instructional time from 3:30 to 6:30 and the playing time from 6:30 to 7. So that's where that changes a little bit. I will say I feel like I'd like for them to have the extra money, working a couple extra hours, but at the same time, at some point, these folks got to get some rest. So we're having those couple hours back. It's probably worth more than the money, but some might disagree. But that's the major change in that, and that was just to stay within the confines of the budget of money from the grant. And we all know there's going to come a time, right, where that grant's going to sunset, and we're going to have to make some decisions and figure that out. And
Is it a state grant?
yes, it's a state grant, I do believe. I'll have to double check and make sure.
You know what the time period is? How long?
It's done after the 24-25 year. Yeah.
Same site, all the high schools.
Yeah, it's all the high schools right now. Yeah. So we'll have to look at what we're going to do, because I think we've had good success with it. It's been very helpful. I know the principals love it. I mean, it's just helping, them get kids graduated. I mean, it's just a huge impact on kids, right? But, I feel like we are creating things like Lincoln Park. So if I had to guess, we're gonna have to scale back some way. We don't have limited budget, right? So we'll have to figure it out and figure out what's best for kids. So, but I'm just thankful we can do it for one more year. So those are the two MOUs I have. So the other MOUs that we'll want to talk about next week is critical shortage. The other one I did not bring is just because we just got the data. We're thankful that the SI schools and additional resources that we won't have to call it SI schools this year because we do not have SI schools. However, we know we still have fragile schools, right? So, so we're looking at that and what that looks like now that we know we don't have any Ds or Fs. We still feel like we've got folks that are always teetering on that line. I don't have to call the schools out by name. We know who they are. So we'll bring back and have a proposal for that next week. It's that critical shortage when that we really need to have some discussion around. And then the other piece is the teacher support mentor program, right? We need an update on that. So nailing down a meeting for that it's been my thing. I haven't had time to include that with everything yet. So I'm gonna get with Dr. Scott on that. And I do think it was successful. I do think that she's got some good data to provide and share. I think probably you guys, not many people watch the workshops, but I think there's a workshop not too long ago that she presented some data to it was the one on the staffing plan, that she showed some data to the board. So we're here to come forth with that information. Maybe she can come to the bargaining session and discuss that with us next week. I got to make sure her schedule doesn't have a conflict.
What about she back from?
Okay. All right. Well, I'll get somebody from them. We'll figure out somebody that's not on vacation, or they can relay it to me, and I can present what they have. I can probably handle that. Transfer sick leave. We'll have that MOU next week also ready for sign. There's nothing really earth shattering with that, as we saw from our kind of subcommittee joint meeting with them. So we'll have that one too.
Did you have anything on teacher attendance?
I do not have anything on teacher attendance. I think that's kind of, as we look at some of that class coverage, that's kind of that data we're looking to try and pull on teacher attendance. So what I'd like to do is, as we're talking about that, revisit at our next session the possibility of some of that leave buyback and things we've looked at in the past that, you know, there's been a little interest, but not much. So, that's what we have to present today. I know you guys probably want to caucus.
We will figure out whether we can get the problem done before the 1 o'clock, or then we'll see how far we get.
Okay.
We'll let you know, if nothing else. We'll let you know, we'll just say, we'll keep talking, and then you guys can just go, and we'll come back then next week.
Okay, so we'll caucus, go in, you guys can weigh it out whether it's worth, and you'll let us know. All right, cool. All right. All right, we are pausing our meeting for a caucus. It's 11:47 on 8/1/2024.